morning, you may notice something quite interesting about myself and Mr. Walton. We may look a little bit different. Well, that's because this morning I am in fact Dr. Spalding, and this is Professor Walton, and we're here to talk to you about something which you may not know a lot about, which is the biology and psychology of learning.
Thank you, Dr. Spalding. You'll notice that we've also got a prop here today. This is a skeleton. We can see how this works. We can see the bones, we can see how the fingers are connected to the hands. If we were to put the next layer on top of the skeleton, we'd be able to see the muscles and the organs and how they work. But the bit that's difficult is what goes on inside here. This brain, this stuff that's between our ears that makes us think and breathe and love and be happy and be able to learn things is such a powerful and wonderful thing, but we never really talk about it very much at school. We expect you to know how to learn, but today we're going to show you a little bit more about what that means. First of all, we're going to watch a video.
As for every single one of us, learning something new means rearranging the way her brain works. Our brain has an astonishing 100 billion neurons, or brain cells, all connected together. Learning is about creating and strengthening pathways through these neurons for impulses of electricity. But between each and every connection in our brains, there's a tiny gap called a synapse. For any of us to learn something new, the electrical signal has to jump across this gap to continue its journey. The gap between the two brain cells is tiny, but that doesn't mean it's straightforward for a signal to get from one side to the other. For us, it's like crossing a deep ravine. And getting from one side to the other should tell us something about the way we learn. The first time a signal crosses from one brain cell to the other demands the most effort, and it's the same when we cross our ravine. The first trip across is the hardest. Having crossed the ravine once, the journeys across get easier and easier. And a similar thing happens when we learn something. To start with, learning is difficult. As the signal crosses the gap between the brain cells again and again, we establish a more solid pathway. Sorry about that. By the time we've made the crossing over and over again, it becomes effortless. We can do it whenever we like. We finally learned something.
So we've just seen this video with Professor Winston talking to us about the effort that it takes to make that first learning connection. Throwing that rope across the bridge demanded the most effort. He had somebody with him as well. We'll come back to that other person in a minute. But when we're thinking about making those learning connections, what we're actually doing is talking about strengthening the connections between our synapses. We're building that bridge We're starting to put extra planks down. We're making it stronger so that that learning happens and that we can revisit that thing that we've learned whenever we want. This is revision. This is what we're talking about. This is why within a lesson we are going back over things. Why at home you should be doing this extra, and the effort that you're putting in is your attitude to learning. How often are you throwing that rope across the ravine, it falling off, but you're carrying on, you're trying, you're giving it everything that you can to be able to continue to try to learn. Your attitude towards your learning. Those synapses, we've talked a little bit about the brain in here. It's actually made up of something very similar to blancmange. It's very heavy, it's made of water, it smells of metal, and there's electricity going on. It's all a little bit strange. Electricity jumping takes energy. We've got a machine here that's plugged in. The energy is making this belt turn to enable us to show sparks happening in a similar way to the synapses in your head. Notice sometimes they are strong connections and sometimes they're weaker, just like in our mind. As well as the biology of what we've seen in the human brain, there's also the emotional side. There's the psychology of how we learn. This man, Dr. Lev Vygotsky, also talked about the psychology. He gave us ways and a means to try and explain how we learn. Although we can see how our bones work, we can't see what goes on inside the brain, other than the fact it's electrical signals. So we need another way to be able to explain it. Dr. Vygotsky talked about this idea of things that you can do by yourself. You would probably be able to walk by yourself with no help from your mum or your dad or anyone else. It's built in. You would probably be able to start to learn some noises to be able to communicate, but you probably wouldn't be able to speak a language in the way that you do now. You probably wouldn't be able to do mathematics, although you may recognise small numbers of objects. The bigger section is what you're capable of doing, what our brains are capable of doing, what potential we have. But in order to get there, we have this area called a zone of proximal development. That's the bit where a more knowledgeable learner can help you to grow and to learn. Just like in the video with Professor Winston, where he had somebody else, a professional climber, helping him to build that bridge. This section at the edge of our zone of proximal development is quite often the hardest part. It hurts our minds. We are starting to learn something new, we're putting in lots of effort, but we feel that we're hitting a brick wall. It's difficult. We're hitting the edge of our zone of proximal development. It's not an easy process to go through.
A lot of these ideas that we're talking to you about this morning, we learn as trainee teachers. We go and we study and we learn about learning so we can come and help you in school. But we think it's really important that you have an understanding, because you're the ones at the centre of this journey. You're the ones who are going to come into us in year 7 and leave with your GCSE qualifications and hopefully stay with us to go on to A-levels. This lady is somebody that I've read about in the last few years, called Professor Carol Dweck. Now, she's written a lot about this idea of learning being hard, and she explains it in this way. She says that some people believe they have a fixed mindset. In other words, some of us are born intelligent, some of us aren't. Now, the problem, she says, with that idea of a fixed mindset is, why bother trying if you were one of those people who weren't born intelligent? Now, I'm going to put my hands up, Mr. Walton. When I was at school, this was very much my feelings about maths. Can't do it, no point trying, never be good at it. English, reading, writing, that's my subject. And then I had a nasty wake-up call. I found out I actually needed a C grade in maths to be an English teacher. And that really challenged me, because it made me think, well, I'm going to have to do something about this. I'm going to have to work hard, and I'm going to have to hope that I get better better at maths as a result? Well, I'm pleased to say that I did. I'm obviously stood here as an English teacher, and actually that taught me a really important lesson. Actually, it taught me to have what's called a growth mindset, and that's the belief that with hard work, your mind can learn new things, and that actually your intelligence can increase. Your learning and your knowledge can get better. And Carol Dweck says this is almost like thinking about your brain like a muscle. If you go down the gym and you pump iron, you're going to get nice big muscles. Well, actually your brain works in the same way. And if you think back to that biology of learning, that's right, isn't it? Because with repetition, you strengthen those links between your brain cells. You create those paths between your synapses. So next time you're trying to learn something new, really think, are you approaching it with a fixed mindset? Can't do it, or I can do it? Or are you thinking about it in a growth mindset way, realising that actually, whatever your starting point, is about hard work and repetition, and that's what's going to make the difference. But it's all well and good me standing here saying that, have a growth mindset, keep at it, you'll get better. What that doesn't do is explain to us how difficult it can be emotionally to learn. This is another very intelligent woman called Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and she was very interested in these emotions behind learning, and she came up with the idea of a change curve. Now she says that at the start of learning, it can sometimes be created by shock and surprise. Now this was me for maths. When I realised that in algebra we actually have not just numbers but letters as well, it's a bit of a nasty surprise, Mr. Walton. And that really led to feelings of denial and frustration. Well, this is pointless. Right? What's the point of me trying to learn this? This is impossible. And I'm sure some people sitting here have felt like that as well. At the bottom of the change curve, there are often feelings of depression. Now, we've had Year 11 internal exams in the last few weeks, and it really does sadden me as a teacher to know that I've seen a few students, perhaps at the bottom of that change curve, really feeling quite down, quite sad about where they are, feeling like perhaps things aren't possible and they can't change. But my message for every single person sat here is that actually, this is well documented, that really is the start of this change curve. What we need to do when we find ourselves in that position is to actually engage with the situation. Now in schools that might mean attending a revision class. It might be going to speak to your teacher at break or lunchtime. It might be making sure that when you're set a homework that challenges you, you spend a significant amount of time on it. Or you ask questions about bits you don't understand. And that doesn't always have to be a teacher. It could well be a friend, a parent. We're very lucky in our school to have lots of support networks. And that's what I mean by actually engaging, doing something about it, take that first step. And if you make those decisions and decide that you're going to approach your learning with a feeling of positivity, you will find that your emotions change too. And the outcome of this change curve actually is new habits, new practices. And you will find that actually that's when you start to realise how far you've come. So, this morning, I hope that me and Mr. Walton have started to introduce you to some ideas about how we learn, about in particular why learning is so hard. Why do we feel those frustrations? Well, it's because we're permanently altering our brain. We're trying to do something with energy, which is incredibly challenging and difficult. But when you're faced with those challenges, it's important to realise actually there is an outcome. And with that repetition, with the help of a more knowledgeable other, you have the absolute potential to achieve at our school.
Thank you very much.